Do you know what the hardest thing for a man to do is? Nothing. Masculine men in particular find the concept of doing nothing unbearable. That makes sense, right? From a biological evolutionary perspective, men are the active gender. We build, we create, we explore, we innovate. You want me to do nothing? That goes completely against my instincts. But I'm going to make the case in this video that men's predilection to constant action is both their biggest strength, but also their biggest weakness. And so let me turn the mirror on you right now. You listening, ask yourself this question. How comfortable are you not taking action? How comfortable are you doing nothing? When something goes wrong, when there's a problem, something's broken, a mistake has been made, are you capable of doing nothing? Or are you filled with an anxiety, a panic, and an overwhelming need to instantly fix it, to right that wrong, to correct that mistake? Because if you are, I'm going to argue that that's a weakness that can be readily exploited by women, by the workplace, by the culture. I had a Hey Hero consultation recently where a guy was talking to me about a date where he went on, where he completely messed up. He said a bunch of really stupid stuff at the end of the date. He was nervous. It was awkward. He was talking to me, trying to get advice. Like, what should I text her? What should I say to her when I see her again in order to fix this? And I don't think that he liked my advice because what I told him to do was nothing. He didn't like that because internally he's looking for some kind of solution to his angst. He's feeling so embarrassed. He's feeling insecure and he wants to do something. He wants to take some action to remove that feeling from inside himself. But at that stage, having made that mistake, any additional action that he was going to take to try and relieve those symptoms was only going to make the situation worse. You can just imagine how awkward those text messages would be. Hey, I wanted to apologize. I'm really sorry. I'm usually a lot more confident than that. I don't know what came over me. As weird as the ending of the date was, you're going to make it 10 times more weird for her when she reads those messages, goes, oh my God, what is with this guy? Or if upon meeting her for their next date, he starts off with like, hey, I just wanted to apologize for last time. I know it was super weird. It won't happen again. That's not going to start the date off on the right foot. That's going to make things way more weird. The correct thing to do in that situation is nothing. So much about a situation like that is about frame, and she's going to take her cues on how to interpret that situation based on you, based on how you feel about it. And so if you're making a big deal and constantly apologizing and tripping over yourself trying to appease her, she's going to look at you like, whoa, this guy is a loser. Look how insecure and needy he is. No, thank you. All my attraction has dried up. But if your frame is strong enough to just move on, not make a big deal out of it, she'll be like, oh, I guess it's not a big deal. And if you're confident moving forward, then she'll just forget about it. So many men hate hearing this because they've been wired to deal with their emotions by taking action. I feel scared, so I go and do this. I feel sad, so I go and do this, you know? I'm out there, I'm changing things, I'm creating, I'm rearranging the world to suit me better. Action is how I cope with unpleasant emotions. But the message of this video is that sometimes the best action is inaction. As a man, you've got to learn that. If you truly want to cultivate your masculinity to the far pinnacles of what it can achieve, then you need to have a wide spectrum of options available to you. And one of those options has to be to do nothing. If that sounds like you really can't sit still, you can't not take action, then please watch this video to the end. In your life, you should be looking at every situation from the lens of how can I derive maximum benefit from this with minimal effort. There is something masculine and sort of admirable about a man who's like a bulldozer, who just doesn't really pay any attention to his outside circumstances, doesn't take no for an answer. He's just got the willpower and the ambition and he just gets things done. It's noisy, it's destructive, but look, he's on his path. I get that. That has a certain appeal, but let me present to you a different option. I'm thinking of an archetype of masculinity more like a surfer, somebody who puts their board on the wave, you know, a little bit of effort to get up there, but then largely lets the natural currents deliver to them this thrill. Minimal effort, maximum return. If that metaphor doesn't make sense to you, maybe think of it like this, like a martial arts perspective, because you know, in martial arts, a lot of it's about attacking, and then, of course, there's obviously like defending, but at a really high level in martial arts, it's about using your opponent's strength against you, doing nothing and allowing them to almost fight themselves. The most basic example could be if your opponent is trying to punch you or kick you, you could block it and absorb that blow, but that's going to hurt. It's going to take some energy out of you. If you actually just step to the side and their momentum, pushes them over and they fall over, you've done very little, but to a huge maximal effect. This is what I want to encourage in men, is to learn the right time when to take no action, particularly when it comes to dating and relationships. One of the members of my Patreon community has been sending me messages about the fights that he's been having with his girlfriend. And they always have this same pattern where, she gets frustrated at him, he gets frustrated at her, maybe he did something wrong, she did something wrong. But when she's had enough, she sort of walks away. And at that point, huge amount of anxiety overcomes him. He feels nervous. He feels potentially abandoned. And so he always is the one apologizing. He chases after her and he's like, hey, look, I'm sorry. I don't want to fight. Let's just make up. It's difficult to listen to him describe this dynamic, especially when there are situations where he's 100% in the right. It's not always the case, but sometimes she's really done the wrong thing. And yet he's so nervous about doing nothing and letting all those uncomfortable emotions just sort of sit there with the situation unresolved, that in his desperation to get rid of those emotions, he takes premature action. He goes and apologizes even when it's not warranted. That's not the right approach. If your girlfriend has acted really badly and the two of you have a fight about it, yeah, it's going to be tense. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be awkward. It's going to potentially be frightening. That doesn't mean that you need to take action. You should do nothing. If you're constantly trying to fix every single situation, then you're essentially protecting her from the consequences of her own actions. If you do nothing, then it gives her time to reflect on her behavior, to feel some of that guilt, some of that shame, some of that potential fear of losing you, which is going to encourage her to come back to the relationship with a more conciliatory perspective and tone. It is difficult to understate how effective this can be when things are tense in a couple and you've been fighting a lot. Try doing nothing, especially if that's breaking a habit from previous behavior that you display. Doing nothing could be an absolute game changer for you. You're not giving her time to actually feel her own discomfort. If you just take a step back, do nothing, then maybe she's the one that will come to you. The reason why I say that the inability to do nothing is a weakness that women can exploit is because in abusive relationships, a woman will know if her man is uncomfortable with silence, uncomfortable with situations not being resolved. And so she'll happily act obnoxious, abusive, because she knows all she needs to do to get you back on side is to leave. And then in that discomfort, in that silence, you're going to come begging her for reconciliation. Don't give her that satisfaction. Call her bluff. Let her stew in her own juices for a while. But men often have a really difficult time with this because I think as a gender, the way that we're neurologically wired is just to not be that comfortable with ambiguity. We don't really like gray areas. We're quite logical. We want to understand things. We want to figure them out. We want to know where we stand, where other people stand. We're more comfortable in an environment that's black and white. But this is one of those areas where men can actually learn something a bit from the feminine in that they should be more comfortable with the inherent chaos of life. Life is chaotic. And yes, it's one of the best parts of masculinity that we're putting it into order. But if you're doing that prematurely, then you're liable to create a kind of false order that's inherently dysfunctional. Just relax. Let the situation sit unresolved. Let the negative emotions just sort of sit there for a little bit. There's something really powerful about waiting for more data to come in. Like one of the most common requests I get on Hey Hero is people tell me about this girl that they're seeing. Like she has these positive traits or these negative traits. Should I commit to her? Should I break up with her? And while I'm happy to give my thoughts, one of the most consistent responses I always give to men is you don't yet have enough data to be able to make that determination. Just wait, be patient. Ask her these questions, put her in these situations, give it a few more months, see how things develop. It's such a bad idea to call the results of an experiment and then take action based on those results before you've gathered enough data. That's the kind of man who prematurely commits to a woman or breaks up with her and then is potentially miserable with his decision because he made the wrong one. Like if he commits to a woman because he thinks like, at first, she seemed really great, but it turns out she's an obnoxious nightmare. She's abusive, low-quality woman. It's like, right, well, maybe if you didn't propose to her after 3 months, you could have spared yourself from that situation. slow it down. You don't need to know if you're going to marry her yet. You're just dating. Give it 6 months, give it 6 years. Take as much time as you need to be able to observe her, to gather enough data before you can actually make that call. But for a man who's really insecure and he's not confident in his masculinity, that kind of chaos and uncertainty just freaks him out too much. And so he'd rather make the wrong decision because at least a decision has been made. That makes him feel safer. That's terrible. That's not going to work. You're going to make bad decisions. And when it comes to dating and relationships, you can't afford to take this stuff lightly. The consequences of who you choose to be in a relationship with are going to be massive. It may well be the most important choice you make in your entire life. Do not rush that. Do not commit to a woman unless you are absolutely certain that she's high quality and you're going to have a happy life with her. Do you see there how valuable inaction can be? I've been using the word inaction because I think it gets the point across. And, for people who just need the sort of simple idea, they can get what I'm talking about. But if you've watched this far into the video, I think you'll be able to follow me here. So let's take it a little bit more nuanced. Let's say that the man who does nothing is taking action, but the man who feels compelled to act, he's not really acting, he's reacting. Do you see the difference? Can you see the distinction between a man who's confident to do nothing, to observe, to wait for his time, wait for himself to be sure before he really commits to one choice, as opposed to a man who's anxious and timid and insecure, and when something happens, he just instantly sort of reacts out of instinct. You don't want to be a man who's reacting. You want to be a man who's capable of action, real masculine action, as well as the personal benefits to you, your life, your mental health. I guarantee women are going to find a man who's capable of action a lot more attractive than a man who's always reacting. Now, let me ask you this. What would you do if you were with a woman who had an extremely adventurous sexual past with other men, but now that she's in a relationship with you, her bedroom proclivities are very tame, her tastes are very vanilla? How would you handle that? Would you be upset? Would you be angry? Would it not bother you? Would you speak to her about it? What would you say? This question and all of those options are the topic of my latest video that I've released on Patreon. Patreon is where I release paid exclusive content. It's always a bit more nuanced. YouTube videos have to be sort of short and flashy for the algorithm, but Patreon's where I'm really able to go into depth on this stuff. If you want to see that video, if you want access to my exclusive video catalog, hundreds of videos at this stage, then go and sign up to my Patreon. It's just $5 a month. We have a great community. I'd love to see you over there.